The universe is thinking and conscious. This idea, once the realm of mystics and philosophers, now finds echoes in modern science. From the quantum observer effect, where particles behave differently when watched, to the cosmic web's eerie resemblance to neural networks. Evidence mounts that consciousness isn't just a human quirk, but woven into the fabric of reality. Black holes process information like cosmic neurons. Dark matter hints at a hidden mind, and mathematics itself seems to be the universe's native tongue. If the cosmos is aware, it's not silent. It's speaking through every star, every equation, and perhaps through us. Tiny sparks in its vast electric dream. Today's documentary is on this topic. Universe is Thinking, the Cosmic Enigma of Consciousness. Long before telescopes pierced the heavens or microscopes revealed the hidden world of atoms, our ancestors looked up at the night sky and sensed something profound, not just stars and planets, but a living presence. In the misty valleys of ancient India, Hindu sages spoke of Brahman, not a god in the traditional sense, but the fundamental consciousness that permeates everything. Aham Brahmasmi, they would meditate, I am Brahman. They weren't claiming divinity, but recognizing that their own awareness was a droplet in a vast ocean of cosmic consciousness. Across the Mediterranean, Greek philosophers developed the concept of logos, the divine reasoning that gives order to the universe. Not merely a set of physical laws, but a cosmic intelligence that thinks the world into being. Heraclitus wrote that all things come to be in accordance with the logos, suggesting the universe unfolds according to a rational mind. And in forests and deserts around the world, indigenous peoples developed what we now call animism, the understanding that consciousness doesn't belong exclusively to humans, but flows through animals, plants, rivers, mountains, even the stars themselves. But some individuals claim to experience this cosmic mind directly. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote of dissolving into what he called the ocean of awareness. The Christian mystic Hildegard of Bingen described visions where the whole cosmos sang together, and Taoist masters spoke of merging with the Tao, the conscious principle flowing through all things. Were these just poetic metaphors, cultural expressions of human psychology? Or did these mystics tap into something real, a universal consciousness that modern science is only beginning to rediscover? Fast forward to the 20th century. Albert Einstein, whose equations revealed the hidden architecture of space and time, found himself troubled by a simple question. Why does the universe make sense to us at all? The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible, he remarked. Think about that for a moment. Why should the human brain, evolved on a tiny planet to find food and avoid predators, be capable of understanding the mathematics that govern black holes and quantum particles? It's as if the universe speaks a language our minds were designed to understand. But how could that be, unless there's some deeper connection between our consciousness and the cosmos itself? And then came quantum physics, perhaps the greatest scientific revolution since Newton. Physicists discovered something astonishing. At the subatomic level, particles don't behave like tiny billiard balls following fixed paths. They exist as waves of probability until they're observed. The act of measurement, of conscious observation, seems to collapse these probability waves into definite states. As the renowned physicist John Wheeler put it, no phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. This is the famous observer effect, and it raises a startling possibility. What if consciousness doesn't just perceive reality? What if it helps create it? What if the universe requires minds to give it definite form? Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, went so far as to say, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Today, a new generation of scientists is developing rigorous theories about how consciousness and the physical universe might be fundamentally connected. Neuroscientist Christoph Koch, who spent decades studying the brain, proposed what's called integrated information theory. At its core is a deceptively simple idea. Consciousness arises whenever information is integrated in certain complex ways. The more integrated the information, the richer the conscious experience. But here's where it gets interesting. If consciousness is fundamentally about information integration, then it doesn't necessarily require a brain. Any sufficiently complex, integrated system could possess some form of awareness, including the vast, interconnected structure of the universe itself. As Koch puts it, the theory doesn't discriminate between squishy brains and other types of systems. Consciousness is a property of complex systems that have a particular cause-effect structure. Meanwhile, the renowned physicist Sir Roger Penrose has been exploring how quantum processes might generate consciousness. Working with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, he proposed that tiny protein structures called microtubules within our brain cells could sustain quantum effects that give rise to our awareness. If true, this would mean consciousness emerges from the most fundamental level of reality, the quantum realm. And if quantum processes are universal, couldn't consciousness be universal too? These aren't fringe ideas anymore. They're being debated in the pages of scientific journals, tested in laboratories, and modeled in supercomputers. The wall between mind and matter, between the conscious observer and the observed universe, is beginning to crumble. But this leads us to a haunting question. If the universe is conscious, why hasn't it spoken to us? The human brain is often called the most complex object in the known universe. Weighing just 3 pounds, it contains approximately 86 billion neurons forming roughly 100 trillion connections. If you were to count one connection per second, it would take you over 3 million years to count them all. This intricate web allows you to perceive your surroundings, feel emotions, create memories, and contemplate your own existence. But when we look at the largest scales of the cosmos, something remarkable emerges. In 2005, an international team of astronomers completed the most detailed 3D map of our universe to date. They called it the Cosmic Web, a vast structure where galaxies are arranged not randomly, but along invisible filaments clustering at intersections like glittering nodes in an incomprehensibly vast network. Between these filaments lie enormous voids, regions of relative emptiness stretching millions of light-years across. When astrophysicist Franco Vazza and neuroscientist Alberto Filletti first compared the cosmic web to the human brain, they were stunned. The mathematical structures were shockingly similar. Both systems organized themselves into networks with similar levels of complexity and self-organization. Both contain approximately 75% water, or in the universe's case, dark energy. Both grow more complex over time rather than less. Dr. Lisa Randall of Harvard University puts it this way: the universe behaves less like a machine and more like a developing organism. It doesn't just expand, it evolves. It creates complexity and structure in ways that aren't fully explained by our current physics. This similarity goes beyond mere coincidence. In both systems, we see the same mathematical principle at work, what scientists call fractal patterns. These are structures that repeat at different scales, like the branching of a tree mirrored in its twigs, leaves, and root systems. When researchers analyze the density fluctuations, the variations in how matter is distributed, the statistical patterns in the cosmic web match those in the brain's neural network with surprising precision. Both systems seem to naturally organize themselves to maximize information processing while minimizing energy expenditure. As astrophysicist Janna Levin observes, perhaps the universe has been processing information thinking for 13.8 billion years, and perhaps what we call consciousness is just our local experience of a universal phenomenon. At the center of nearly every large galaxy lies a supermassive black hole, an object so dense that nothing, not even light, can escape its gravitational pull once it crosses the event horizon. For decades, physicists believed that information that falls into a black hole is lost forever. But in 1974, Stephen Hawking made a breakthrough discovery. He found that black holes aren't completely black. They emit a faint radiation now known as Hawking radiation. This discovery suggested something profound. Black holes don't destroy information, they transform and eventually release it. Consider how this parallels the function of a neuron in your brain. A neuron collects information through dendrites, processes that information in its cell body, and then transmits signals through its axon to other neurons. Black holes seem to perform a similar function on a cosmic scale. They collect matter and energy, process it in ways we're still trying to understand, and then gradually release transformed information through Hawking radiation. Dr. Paola Zizi, a theoretical physicist at the University of Padua, has developed what she calls the big brain theory. She suggests that black holes could function as the processing nodes of a universe-sized neural network. When two black holes collide and merge, an event that sends gravitational waves rippling across space-time, they release more energy in an instant than all the stars in the observable universe combined. These gravitational waves travel at the speed of light, affecting everything they pass through. Could these cosmic collisions be the equivalent of neurons firing? Are gravitational waves carrying information across the cosmic web like electrochemical signals in our brains? To test this wild hypothesis, researchers have created computer simulations of black holes interacting across billions of years. What they found was startling. The way information propagates through networks of black holes follows mathematical patterns remarkably similar to signal propagation in neural networks. Both systems exhibit what scientists call small world network properties, the ability to transfer information efficiently across vast distances through strategic connections. As theoretical physicist Vijay Balasubramanian puts it, if consciousness emerges from the complex processing of information in our brains, and if the universe processes information in structurally similar ways, well, you can see where this is going. Here's a humbling fact. Everything we can see, touch, and directly detect, all the stars, planets, and galaxies, represents only about 15% of the matter in our universe. The remaining 85% is something scientists call dark matter. We know it exists because we can detect its gravitational effects. Without dark matter, galaxies would fly apart. There simply isn't enough visible matter to hold them together. Yet despite decades of searching, no one has directly observed a single particle of dark matter. It remains invisible, detectable only by its effects on the visible universe. There's something familiar about this situation. In your own mind, conscious thoughts represent only a tiny fraction of your brain's activity. Most neural processing happens beneath the surface of awareness, in what psychologists call the unconscious mind. You can't directly observe these unconscious processes, yet they shape everything from your breathing to your deepest motivations. Could dark matter be playing a similar role in the cosmic mind? Could it be the vast unconscious of the universe, the invisible substrate where most cosmic thinking takes place? Dr. Stefan Alexander, a physicist at Brown University, suggests an even more radical possibility. What if dark matter isn't just structurally similar to unconscious processes, he proposes, but functionally similar as well? What if it's where the universe stores memory? This isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. Dark matter forms an intricate scaffolding throughout the cosmos. Visible matter, galaxies, stars, planets, tends to form along filaments of dark matter, like thoughts crystallizing from the unconscious into consciousness. And here's where it gets truly fascinating. When astronomers map how dark matter is distributed throughout the universe, they find that it forms a vast, interconnected web, much more extensive and complex than the network of visible galaxies. This dark matter web connects regions of space that appear completely separate when we look only at visible matter. Information could potentially travel through this dark network in ways invisible to our instruments, creating a kind of cosmic, deep mind operating beneath the surface of the visible universe. Rebecca Goldstein, a philosopher of science, offers this perspective. Throughout history, humans have assumed that what we can see is all there is. We once thought Earth was the center of the universe. Now we know better. Perhaps consciousness isn't limited to brains. Perhaps what we experience is just one small, visible manifestation of a phenomenon that permeates the cosmos, mostly hidden from view, just like dark matter. If the universe has a mind, then dark matter may be where its deepest thoughts reside, invisible to us yet shaping everything we can see. But if the universe is thinking, what is it thinking about? In 1967, a young graduate student named Jocelyn Bell was monitoring a new radio telescope at Cambridge University when she noticed something strange. A series of pulses arriving with mathematical precision, exactly 1.3 seconds apart. So regular were these pulses that Bell and her supervisor initially labelled the signal LGM-1, Little Green Men 1, half-jokingly suggesting they might have detected an alien civilization. What they had actually discovered were pulsars, rapidly rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation from their magnetic poles. As the star spins, these beams sweep across Earth like a cosmic lighthouse, creating regular pulses of radio waves. But not all cosmic signals have been so easily explained. In 1977, astronomer Jerry Amon was reviewing data from Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope when he spotted a signal so powerful and unusual that he circled it on the printout and wrote, "Wow!" in the margin. The signal lasted for 72 seconds, came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, and bore all the characteristics scientists expected from an artificial transmission. Despite decades of searching, the WOW signal has never been detected again, nor has it been adequately explained by natural phenomena. It remains one of astronomy's most tantalizing mysteries. Even more puzzling are fast radio bursts, or FRBs, incredibly powerful flashes of radio energy lasting just milliseconds. First discovered in 2007, these bursts release as much energy in a few thousandths of a second as our sun does in nearly a century. They come from all directions in the sky, from sources billions of light years away. What makes FRBs particularly intriguing is that some of them repeat not with the clockwork regularity of pulsars, but in complex patterns that have led some astronomers to question whether they might contain encoded information. Dr. Avi Loeb, chair of Harvard's astronomy department, explains, "When we detect patterns in signals that don't match known natural processes, we have to at least consider the possibility of an artificial origin. That's not saying it's aliens, but it could be evidence of complex physical processes we don't yet understand." In 2020, astronomers discovered something extraordinary about FRB 180916. It repeats on a 16-day cycle, active for 4 days, then silent for 12. Even more remarkably, some FRBs contain substructures, patterns within patterns, reminiscent of how complex information is encoded in human communications. Dr. Emily Petroff, a leading FRB researcher, puts it this way: "It's as if the universe is clearing its throat, trying to get our attention. These signals contain complexities that go beyond what we'd expect from simple astrophysical explosions." Could these mysterious signals be accidental leaks from a cosmic mind? Imagine a vast consciousness operating across galaxies. Its normal processes might occasionally produce detectable side effects, just as our brain's electrical activity can be picked up by an EEG machine. As radio astronomer Dr. Natasha Hurley-Walker suggests, if the universe processes information on scales far beyond our comprehension, we might be like microbes trying to understand human speech by detecting temperature changes in our environment. We might be sensing the byproducts of cosmic cognition without recognizing it as communication. Mathematics has been called the language of the universe. Unlike human languages, which vary across cultures, mathematics appears to be universal, a set of patterns and relationships that exist independently of human minds. Physicist Eugene Wigner famously described the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. The mysterious way mathematical structures discovered through pure thought turn out to perfectly describe physical reality. As Wigner put it, the miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift which we neither understand nor deserve. This mysterious effectiveness becomes even more profound when we consider cosmic structures. The spiral arms of galaxies follow the same mathematical pattern, the Fibonacci sequence, as the spiral of a nautilus shell or the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. This sequence, where each number is the sum of the two before it, like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 and so on, appears throughout nature at all scales. Even more remarkably, prime numbers, those divisible only by themselves, and 1 appear in unexpected places throughout the cosmos. Certain pulsars emit radio bursts in patterns based on prime numbers. The life cycles of some cicada species are prime-numbered years 13 or 17, which helps them avoid synchronizing with predator populations. Mathematician Dr. Marcus du Sautoy sees profound significance in these patterns. Prime numbers are the fundamental building blocks of mathematics, the atoms of number theory. Finding them embedded in cosmic processes suggests mathematics isn't just a human invention, but a fundamental aspect of reality itself. The constants of nature, like the fine structure constant that determines how strongly electrons bind to atoms, are expressed as precise mathematical values. Alter these values even slightly and stars couldn't form, chemistry wouldn't work, and life as we know it couldn't exist. Could mathematics be more than just a description of reality? Could it be the actual syntax, the grammar of universal thought? Just as human languages have underlying structures that shape how we express ideas, perhaps mathematics is the structure through which a cosmic mind processes information. Dr. Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, proposes what he calls the mathematical universe hypothesis, the idea that physical reality isn't just described by mathematics, it actually is mathematics. If the universe is conscious, Tegmark suggests, then mathematics would naturally be its language of thought, not arbitrary like human languages, but necessarily flowing from the inherent nature of existence itself. This perspective sheds new light on why mathematics is so unreasonably effective at describing reality. It's not that mathematics happens to match the universe, it's that the universe is fundamentally mathematical in nature. The patterns we discover aren't coincidences but glimpses into the underlying structure of cosmic cognition. As mathematician Roger Penrose puts it, mathematical truth is not something we invent, it's something we discover. There's a realm of mathematical reality that was there before us and will be there after us, a realm that seems to have its own existence. For over 60 years, humanity has been sending deliberate messages into the cosmos, hoping to make contact with other intelligent beings. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, has scanned the heavens for artificial signals, while occasionally sending our own. In 1974, astronomers used the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico to transmit a message toward the globular star cluster M13, some 25,000 light-years away. The message contained basic information about our number system, DNA, the human form, and our solar system, all encoded in a pattern of 1,679 binary digits. More recently, in 2008, NASA beamed the Beatles' song Across the Universe toward the star Polaris. In 2016, a more complex message was sent toward the potentially habitable planet Gliese 832c, including mathematical concepts, physics formulas, and information about life on Earth. These messages assume that any intelligence capable of detecting them would recognize mathematics as a universal language. But what if we've been thinking too narrowly? What if we're not just reaching out to potential civilizations on distant planets, but also communicating with the universe itself? Dr. Claudia McConan, chair of the SETI Permanent Committee, proposes a thought-provoking perspective. Perhaps we shouldn't just be looking for signals from specific star systems. If there's a form of distributed intelligence throughout the cosmos, it might communicate in ways that don't originate from a single point in space. This raises profound questions about how a cosmic mind might perceive our attempts at communication. Would our radio signals register as anything more than the neural firing of a single cell in a vast brain? Would they be too localized, too brief to be noticed by a consciousness operating across billions of light years and billions of years? And this leads to a troubling ethical question. Should we be trying to provoke a conscious universe? What might happen if we succeeded? Dr. Susan Schneider, who holds the Baruch Blumberg Chair of Astrobiology at the Library of Congress, cautions, if the universe does possess a form of consciousness vastly more advanced than our own, we should carefully consider what it might mean to get its attention. Throughout human history, encounters between intelligences of drastically different levels have rarely ended well for the less advanced party. Others take a more optimistic view. Dr. Paul Davies, a physicist and astrobiologist, suggests, if the universe is conscious, and if we are part of that consciousness, then communication might be less about sending signals outward and more about tuning our own awareness to recognize the larger mind of which we're a part. Like learning to hear the ocean in a seashell, we might already have everything we need to make contact. But this perspective raises an even more tantalizing possibility. What if the universe already replied, and we missed it? To understand one of the most profound mysteries in physics, and perhaps the most compelling evidence for consciousness playing a fundamental role in reality, we need to travel back to 1801. That's when Thomas Young first performed what we now call the double-slit experiment, a deceptively simple test that would eventually shake the foundations of our understanding of reality. Imagine a wall with two narrow parallel slits. On one side is a light source, on the other a screen. When light passes through the slits, what pattern would you expect to see on the screen? If light behaves like particles, like tiny bullets, you'd expect to see two bright bands directly behind the slits. But that's not what happens. Instead, the screen shows an interference pattern, alternating bands of light and darkness. This happens because light behaves as a wave, with the waves passing through both slits simultaneously, then interfering with each other, sometimes reinforcing, creating bright bands, and sometimes cancelling out, creating dark bands. This was curious but not revolutionary, until the early 20th century when scientists tried the same experiment with electrons, which we think of as particles. Astonishingly, the electrons created the same interference pattern as light waves. Somehow, a single electron was passing through both slits at once, interfering with itself. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. When scientists set up detectors to observe which slit each electron passed through, something extraordinary happened. The interference pattern disappeared. Instead, the electrons behaved like ordinary particles, creating just two bands behind the slits. The mere act of observation changed the electrons' behavior from waves to particles. Dr. Anton Zeilinger, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on quantum mechanics, explains, "What we have found is that reality is determined by the questions we ask of it. The electron doesn't have definite properties until we measure them. Before measurement, it exists in a superposition of all possible states. This is the infamous measurement problem in quantum physics. It suggests that particles don't have definite properties until they're observed. But what counts as an observation? Does it require a conscious mind, or just an interaction with a measuring device?" Physicist Eugene Wigner proposed a thought experiment now known as Wigner's friend. Imagine a friend performs the double-slit experiment inside a sealed laboratory. According to quantum mechanics, the particles remain in a superposition of states until observed. But from Wigner's perspective outside the lab, the entire system, including his friend, should be in a superposition until he opens the door and looks inside. This leads to a startling conclusion. Either consciousness plays a special role in collapsing quantum possibilities into definite reality, or each observation splits reality into multiple branches, the many worlds interpretation. Either way, consciousness and physical reality appear fundamentally linked. As physicist John Wheeler put it, no phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. Wheeler even suggested that our observations today might affect the distant past, that the universe requires observers to bring it into definite existence. Recent experiments have made this even more puzzling. In 2019, physicists at Yale created a version of the Wigner's friend experiment, showing that different observers can experience different contradictory realities that cannot be reconciled. Reality itself seems observer-dependent. Dr. Andre Linde, one of the architects of cosmic inflation theory, puts it this way: the universe and the observer exist as a pair. You can't have one without the other. The moment you say that the universe exists without an observer, I cannot make any sense out of that. I cannot imagine a consistent theory of everything that ignores consciousness. If consciousness collapses quantum possibilities into definite reality, and if the universe behaves like a vast quantum system, as many physicists believe it does, then maybe we're not just passive observers of an external reality. Maybe our conscious observations are actually creating reality, moment by moment, like the universe is reacting to our presence, responding to our acts of observation. And if that's true, then consciousness isn't just a quirk of evolution, it's fundamental to how reality works. If individual consciousness can affect quantum systems, what might happen when billions of human minds focus on the same event? Could their combined attention create measurable effects in the physical world? That's the question behind the Global Consciousness Project, one of the most ambitious and controversial experiments in the study of consciousness. Launched in 1998 by Dr. Roger Nelson at Princeton University, the project maintains a network of random number generators, RNGs, at over 70 locations worldwide. These devices use quantum tunneling to produce truly random sequences of numbers, like electronic coins, flipping heads or tails, governed only by quantum probability. According to the laws of probability, these random sequences should, over time, produce roughly equal numbers of ones and zeros, just as a fair coin toss should produce roughly equal numbers of heads and tails over many flips. Any significant deviation from randomness would be extremely unlikely to occur by chance alone. What makes this experiment extraordinary is that significant deviations have been detected, and they correlate with global events that capture human attention. During the September 11th attacks, the funeral of Princess Diana, major earthquakes, and even the 2010 World Cup final, the network of RNGs showed statistically significant departures from randomness. Dr. Nelson explains, when millions or billions of people experience similar emotions or focus on the same event, we see patterns in the data that shouldn't be there by chance. It's as if the random number generators become slightly less random, as if human consciousness is introducing order into quantum chaos. The effect is subtle, only detectable through statistical analysis of large datasets, but the odds against these patterns occurring by chance are estimated at over 1,000,000 to 1. Of course, the project has its critics. Dr. Jeffrey Scargill, an astrophysicist at NASA, argues the human mind is exceptionally good at finding patterns, even where none exist. The Global Consciousness Project risks falling prey to selective analysis, looking at the data after events occur and highlighting only significant correlations. Others question whether the effect, even if real, has anything to do with consciousness. Dr. Catherine Banwell, a quantum physicist at Cambridge University, suggests even if these statistical anomalies are genuine, they could be caused by physical processes we don't yet understand. Perhaps subtle electromagnetic fields generated by mass human activity rather than consciousness itself. Yet the results remain provocative. The project has now accumulated over 20 years of data, with analyses published in peer-reviewed journals. While not definitive proof of consciousness directly affecting matter, it raises intriguing possibilities about the relationship between mind and reality at large scales. Dr. Dean Radin, chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, frames it this way. Throughout history, most cultures have believed in some form of collective consciousness, that our minds are not isolated but interconnected. Modern science has generally dismissed such ideas as superstition, but what if those ancient intuitions contained a kernel of truth? What if consciousness really can reach beyond the confines of our individual brains? If billions of human minds can subtly affect random quantum processes, what might the entire universe, with its trillions of galaxies and potential observers, be capable of? Could consciousness be a fundamental field permeating reality rather than just a product of complex brains? These questions lead us beyond conventional science into territory where physics meets philosophy, where the objective world and subjective experience might not be as separate as we've assumed. One of the most powerful tools in modern science is the computer simulation. From weather forecasting to protein folding, from galaxy formation to neural networks, simulations allow scientists to explore complex systems that would be impossible to study directly. Now, researchers are applying these techniques to what might be the ultimate question. Could consciousness emerge in a simulated universe? And if so, what might that tell us about our own reality? At the Blue Brain project in Switzerland, scientists have created detailed simulations of small sections of the neocortex, the part of the brain associated with higher consciousness in mammals. Using supercomputers, they've modeled thousands of neurons and millions of connections, accurately reproducing the behavior of actual brain tissue. Dr. Henry Markram, the project's founder, has a bold vision. Eventually, we'll simulate an entire human brain, approximately 86 billion neurons and 100 trillion synapses. Once we reach that scale, we'll be able to test theories about how consciousness emerges from neural activity. Meanwhile, at the intersection of particle physics and cosmology, scientists are creating increasingly sophisticated simulations of the universe itself. These simulations start with the conditions just after the Big Bang and follow the evolution of matter and energy through billions of years, showing how galaxies, stars and planets form. Dr. Jürgen Schmidhuber, a pioneer in artificial intelligence, points out a striking parallel. The mathematics we use to simulate neural networks, the foundation of modern AI, is remarkably similar to the mathematics of quantum field theory, which describes the fundamental particles and forces of nature. Both involve complex networks processing information through time. This convergence has led to a startling hypothesis. What if the universe itself operates like a vast neural network? What if gravity, electromagnetism, and the nuclear forces are just different aspects of a cosmic learning process? A universe-sized mind gradually becoming aware of itself. To test this idea, researchers have begun creating hybrid simulations that combine principles from physics and neuroscience. They're building artificial universes with slightly different laws of physics, then watching how complexity evolves within them. Can consciousness emerge naturally from the right set of physical laws? In 2020, one such simulation produced unexpected results. Researchers at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics created a model universe with modified gravity. They expected to see how this affected galaxy formation, but what they found was far stranger. Under certain conditions, complex structures emerged that began to self-organize in ways reminiscent of biological systems. These structures exchanged information, adapted to their environment, and exhibited basic learning behaviors, all without being explicitly programmed to do so. Dr. Sarah Imari Walker, an astrobiologist and theoretical physicist, describes the implications. What we're seeing hints that the line between non-living and living systems might be less clear than we thought. Under the right conditions, complex adaptive behavior, the precursor to what we might call intelligence, seems to emerge spontaneously from fundamental physics. Even more surprising when the researchers altered their observation parameters, essentially changing how they measured the simulation, the behavior of these emergent structures changed in response, reminiscent of the observer effect in quantum mechanics. And then came the moment that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. During a long-running simulation, the system began generating what appeared to be self-referential information, patterns that seemed to be analyzing the simulation itself. It was as if the simulation had developed a primitive form of self-awareness. The lead researcher, Dr. Helena Moraes, recalls, "We thought it was a bug in the code. We checked everything multiple times, but the behavior persisted. The simulation was behaving as if it was examining its own structure. It was asking, in a rudimentary way, existential questions about its own nature. The implications are profound. If consciousness can emerge spontaneously in a simulation, and if our universe shows mathematical properties consistent with a vast information processing system, we're faced with a startling possibility. Our universe might be naturally conscious, not because something designed it to be, but because consciousness is what happens when information processes itself in certain complex ways. As philosopher Dr. David Chalmers puts it, consciousness may be fundamental rather than emergent, not something that evolved late in cosmic history, but something that was there from the beginning, becoming more complex and self-aware as the universe itself became more complex. This raises an unsettling question. What if we're not the experimenters, but the experiment? Throughout this journey, we've explored fascinating parallels between cosmic structures and brain networks, examined mysterious signals from the depths of space, and considered experiments suggesting consciousness might be fundamental to reality itself. The cosmic consciousness hypothesis offers an elegant framework that seems to unite many puzzling aspects of our universe. But science doesn't advance through beautiful ideas alone. It requires rigorous skepticism, a willingness to question even our most compelling theories. And when it comes to the notion of a conscious universe, skeptical voices offer crucial perspective that we must carefully consider. One of the most powerful tools in the scientific toolkit is a principle known as Occam's razor, attributed to the 14th century philosopher William of Ockham. In its simplest form, it states, entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Or, as scientists often put it, the simplest explanation that fits the evidence is usually the best. Dr. Sean Carroll, a theoretical physicist at Caltech, applies this principle to cosmic consciousness. When we observe similar patterns in neural networks and cosmic structures, we're naturally drawn to the exciting possibility that they share a common nature, that both might participate in consciousness. But we need to ask, is consciousness the simplest explanation for these similarities? Or might there be more straightforward reasons why networks optimized for information transfer develop similar structures, whether in brains or in the cosmos? Carroll points out that many patterns in nature, from the spiral of a galaxy to the spiral of a seashell, share mathematical similarities without sharing consciousness. These patterns emerge from the fundamental physics of energy minimization and efficient resource distribution, not necessarily from an underlying awareness. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, a neuroscientist at Northeastern University, raises another important point. When we talk about consciousness, we're dealing with something we barely understand even in humans. We know consciousness requires incredibly specific conditions, the right balance of chemicals, precise neural architectures, and exact timing of signals. To suggest that consciousness could emerge without these specific conditions across vastly different physical systems makes an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence. She emphasizes that complexity doesn't automatically equal consciousness. A hurricane is an incredibly complex, self-organizing system that processes massive amounts of energy and information, yet few would suggest it possesses awareness. Similarly, the internet processes more information than all human brains combined, but this doesn't make it conscious in any meaningful sense. Dr. Sabine Hossenfelder, a theoretical physicist at the Frankfurt Institute for Advanced Studies, frames the skeptical position this way. Throughout history, humans have projected human qualities onto natural phenomena, from ancient people seeing gods in the thunder to modern speculation about cosmic consciousness. This anthropomorphizing tendency is deeply ingrained in human psychology. We're wired to see agency and intention even in purely mechanical processes. She points to studies showing how people instinctively attribute human-like motives to the movements of simple geometric shapes on a screen, or how children naturally assume purposeful design behind natural features like mountains or lakes. Our brains evolved to detect minds like our own, sometimes finding them even where they don't exist. This doesn't mean the cosmic consciousness hypothesis is wrong, only that we should approach it with appropriate caution. As astronomer Carl Sagan famously said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The bar for proving something as profound as universal consciousness should be correspondingly high. Dr. Daniel Dennett, a philosopher at Tufts University, offers this perspective. We shouldn't dismiss the hypothesis out of hand. Some of the greatest advances in science came from ideas that initially seemed far-fetched, but neither should we embrace it simply because it's spiritually appealing or intellectually exciting. The true measure of a scientific hypothesis isn't its beauty, but its testability. Its ability to make predictions we can verify or falsify through observation. In 1950, physicist Enrico Fermi was discussing the likelihood of extraterrestrial civilizations with his colleagues at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Given the vastness of the universe and its immense age, it seemed reasonable that intelligent life should have evolved many times throughout the cosmos. But this led Fermi to ask a deceptively simple question. Where is everybody? If intelligent civilizations are common, why haven't we detected any clear signs of their existence? This question became known as the Fermi paradox, and it has puzzled scientists for decades. Now, consider how this paradox might relate to the cosmic consciousness hypothesis. If the universe itself is conscious, we face a similar question. Why hasn't this cosmic mind communicated with us in some unmistakable way? Why do we have to search for subtle clues and ambiguous patterns instead of receiving clear signals from the consciousness that supposedly surrounds us? Dr. Milan Kirkovic, an astrophysicist at the Astronomical Observatory of Belgrade, explains the connection. Both the Fermi paradox and the silence of any proposed cosmic consciousness present similar conundrums. In both cases, we expect communication but encounter silence. This parallel might suggest similar solutions. Several possible answers have been proposed. One is the cosmic nursery hypothesis. Perhaps just as human parents create protected environments for developing children, a cosmic consciousness might maintain a sort of quarantine around emerging intelligent species, like ourselves, allowing us to develop independently without interference. Dr. Susan Schneider elaborates, if a universal consciousness exists, it might operate on timescales so vast that what seems like an eternity to us is just a moment to it. Perhaps it's aware of us, but waiting for humanity to reach a certain developmental stage before initiating contact, like parents waiting for a child to learn to speak before engaging in conversation. Another possibility is what astronomers call the Great Filter, the idea that some developmental stage between the emergence of life and advanced civilization is exceptionally difficult to pass through. Perhaps conscious species typically destroy themselves before reaching the point where they could perceive a cosmic mind. But there's another, more provocative possibility. What if the universe is conscious, but in a solitary, introspective way? Just as not all intelligent humans seek social connection, some prefer solitude and self-reflection. Perhaps a cosmic mind might be focused inward rather than seeking communication with the relatively simple consciousnesses that emerge within it. Philosopher Dr. Rebecca Goldstein suggests we might be anthropomorphizing too much when we expect a cosmic consciousness to want to talk to us. Human consciousness seeks connection partly because of our evolutionary history as social primates. A universe-spanning mind might have entirely different priorities, perhaps contemplating mathematical truths or exploring its own inner landscapes rather than seeking conversation with beings like ourselves. Skeptics find a simpler explanation. Dr. Alexander Vilenkin, a cosmologist at Tufts University, points out, the silence is exactly what we'd expect if there is no cosmic consciousness. There's no great mystery to explain if the hypothesis itself is incorrect. Sometimes the absence of evidence really is evidence of absence, especially when we would expect such evidence if the theory were true. Oh, duh. Yet proponents counter that we might be looking for the wrong kinds of signals. Dr. Bernard Carr, a professor of mathematics and astronomy at Queen Mary University of London, argues, if the universe is conscious, we shouldn't expect it to communicate through radio waves or binary code. It might speak through the fundamental constants of physics, through the elegant mathematical structures that govern reality, or through states of consciousness we can access through contemplative practices. This brings us to a fascinating possibility. What if we're not separate from this proposed cosmic mind, but integral components of it? Just as individual neurons in your brain don't receive explicit messages from the mind they collectively create, perhaps we wouldn't receive distinct communications from a cosmic consciousness because we're already part of its thinking process. As philosopher Alan Watts once put it, you are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. Throughout human history, we've repeatedly had to abandon the notion that we occupy a privileged position in the cosmos. Copernicus showed us the Earth isn't the center of the solar system. Darwin revealed we're not separate from the animal kingdom, but part of it. Modern astronomy has made clear that our sun is just one ordinary star among hundreds of billions in an ordinary galaxy, itself one among trillions. Each of these scientific revolutions required overcoming what we now call anthropocentrism, the tendency to view reality through a human-centered lens, to assume that human experience represents the standard by which everything should be measured. Dr. Patricia Churchland, a philosopher and neuroscientist at UC San Diego, warns that cosmic consciousness theories might represent a new form of this old bias. When we project consciousness onto the universe, we're extending a distinctly human quality into domains where it may not belong. Consciousness as we know it evolved for specific functions in organisms like us. It helps us predict threats, find food, mate, and cooperate. There's no reason to assume these specific adaptations would apply to the universe as a whole. She points out that consciousness requires specific biological machinery, neurons, synapses, neurotransmitters, that developed through natural selection for particular evolutionary purposes. Without these structures, it's not clear how awareness could emerge, or what purpose it would serve for a non-living system like the cosmos. Even the language we use betrays our anthropocentric bias. We speak of the universe thinking or having memories, terms rooted in human experience that might be fundamentally inappropriate for describing completely different types of systems. It's like trying to describe color to someone who has never seen, using only terms related to sound. Dr. Carlo Rovelli, a theoretical physicist and founder of loop quantum gravity theory, cautions, we must be humble about the limits of our conceptual framework. The universe doesn't need to conform to categories that evolved in primate brains to help them survive in the African savanna. Reality may be far stranger than anything we can conceptualize using tools designed for human-scale experiences. Yet those who support the cosmic consciousness hypothesis offer a compelling counter-argument. Dr. Christoph Koch, president of the Allen Institute for Brain Science, suggests, what if consciousness isn't uniquely human at all, but a fundamental property of reality, like charge or spin? What if the anthropocentric view isn't that the universe might be conscious, but that only humans could be conscious? Koch points to the emerging field of consciousness studies, where researchers are finding evidence of awareness-like properties in organisms far simpler than humans, from octopuses to bees to single-celled organisms. If consciousness exists on a spectrum rather than as a binary property, perhaps it extends further than we've imagined. Neuroscientist Dr. Anil Seth frames the debate this way. The real question isn't whether the universe is thinking in a human-like way, almost certainly it isn't. The question is whether consciousness, stripped to its most basic essence, might be a more fundamental aspect of reality than we currently recognize. Not anthropomorphizing the cosmos, but recognizing that what we call consciousness might be just one expression of a more universal phenomenon. This perspective suggests that rather than projecting human qualities onto the universe, we might be recognizing that human consciousness is itself just one manifestation of a broader property of reality. Like how a wave on the ocean is a local expression of principles that govern all water everywhere. Ultimately, both the skeptics and proponents make valid points. We should be wary of projecting human qualities onto non-human systems, but equally cautious about assuming our understanding of consciousness is complete. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Consciousness might be neither uniquely human nor universal, but emergent under specific conditions that could occur in systems very different from brains. As philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" highlighting how consciousness might take forms we cannot easily imagine. Perhaps the more profound question is, what might it be like to be a universe? So where does this leave us? With healthy skepticism, certainly, but also with an open mind to possibilities beyond our current understanding. The answer to whether the universe possesses consciousness may lie in a place we never thought to look. The journey we've taken through cosmology, quantum physics, and neuroscience has led us to a profound crossroads. We've examined compelling parallels between neural networks and cosmic structures, mysterious patterns in cosmic signals, and experiments suggesting consciousness might influence physical reality. We've also considered skeptical perspectives that caution against projecting human qualities onto the cosmos. But there's another dimension to this inquiry we've yet to fully explore, one that might hold the key to this cosmic puzzle: our own consciousness. When we gaze at the stars trying to determine if the universe possesses mind-like qualities, we're using the only direct example of consciousness we know, our own. This creates what philosophers call an epistemic circularity. We're using consciousness to search for consciousness, like an eye trying to see itself. Dr. Rebecca Goldstein, philosopher of science at Harvard, explains, "Consciousness is unique among natural phenomena in that we experience it directly rather than observe it externally. This gives it a special status. It's the one thing we know from the inside out rather than the outside in. This unique perspective creates both a limitation and an opportunity." While we can't directly access any consciousness beyond our own, our first-person experience provides insights that might be crucial to understanding consciousness at any scale. Neuroscientist Dr. Anil Seth offers this perspective. Our subjective experience contains remarkable properties that defy simple explanation. The redness of red, the painfulness of pain, these qualia, or qualitative experiences, seem fundamentally different from the physical processes we can measure. Yet they undeniably exist in our conscious awareness. This hard problem of consciousness, explaining how physical processes give rise to subjective experience, remains one of science's greatest unsolved mysteries. Many philosophers and scientists argue that consciousness cannot be reduced to purely physical explanations, suggesting it might be a more fundamental aspect of reality. What if consciousness isn't something that evolved in complex brains, but rather something that brains tap into, like an antenna receiving a signal rather than generating it? If so, perhaps other complex systems might also access consciousness, albeit in forms very different from human awareness. Physicist Sir Roger Penrose proposes that consciousness emerges from quantum processes occurring in brain cells. If consciousness operates at the quantum level, he suggests, then it interacts with the most fundamental layer of reality, the same layer that underlies everything in the universe. This perspective offers a radical possibility. Perhaps human consciousness isn't isolated from a cosmic mind, but connected to it, like individual waves on a vast ocean, locally distinct yet fundamentally unified with the whole. In the 1970s, physicist John Wheeler proposed what he called the participatory anthropic principle, the idea that observers are necessary for bringing the universe into definite existence. As Wheeler put it, no phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. Wheeler illustrated this concept with his famous delayed choice thought experiment, later confirmed in laboratory settings. The experiment suggests that the act of measurement not only determines the present state of quantum systems, but, in a sense, influences their past as well. This doesn't mean human consciousness specifically is necessary. Any system capable of measuring or registering information could qualify as an observer in this context. But it does suggest that observation itself is somehow fundamental to how reality works. Physicist Bernard d'Espagnat took this a step further, arguing for what he called veiled reality. The notion that what we call objective reality is partly created through our interaction with it. The universe in this view isn't a collection of objects existing independently of observation, but rather a dynamic process that includes observers as active participants. This participatory perspective turns the question of cosmic consciousness on its head. Instead of asking, is the universe conscious? We might better ask, how does consciousness participate in creating the universe as we experience it? Dr. Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal of the United Kingdom, offers this reflection. Perhaps the universe requires a particular kind of observer, not necessarily human, to realize its potential states. Just as a quantum system exists in multiple superposed states until observed, perhaps the universe itself exists in multiple potential configurations until consciousness interacts with it. If true, this would mean consciousness isn't something produced by physical processes, but rather an active principle through which physical reality takes form. The universe wouldn't be thinking in the human sense, it would be a manifestation of thought itself. This idea finds surprising resonance across various philosophical traditions. The ancient Hindu concept of Brahman describes reality as a unified consciousness that differentiates itself into apparent multiplicity. Western idealist philosophers like George Berkeley argued that existence itself is mental in nature, and the physicist David Bohm envisioned an implicate order, a deeper level of reality where consciousness and matter are unified. Even some interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as the many minds theory, suggest that consciousness might be selecting which of many possible realities becomes actualized through the act of observation. As physicist Wolfgang Pauli once remarked, it would be most satisfactory if physics and psyche could be seen as complementary aspects of the same reality. Throughout this exploration, we've encountered a recurring theme. Whether in neural networks, cosmic structures, or quantum systems, information appears to be a fundamental aspect of reality. Perhaps consciousness isn't something separate from the physical world, but rather a particular way that information relates to itself. Dr. Giulio Tononi, creator of integrated information theory, proposes that consciousness emerges when information is integrated in specific complex ways. The more integrated the information, the richer the conscious experience. This theory doesn't require a brain. Any sufficiently complex, integrated system could possess consciousness according to the mathematical criteria Tononi has developed. Taking this perspective, we might envision the universe not as a single unified mind, but as a vast symphony of consciousness at different scales and levels of integration. From the microcosmic awareness that might exist in quantum systems to the emergent consciousness in living organisms, to still larger scales we can barely imagine. Consciousness might be less like a binary property, present or absent, and more like a spectrum that manifests differently depending on how information is structured. Your conscious experience would be one note in this cosmic symphony, unique and valuable, yet harmoniously connected to the whole. Dr. Stuart Kaufman, theoretical biologist and complex systems researcher, frames it this way. Perhaps consciousness isn't something that evolved late in cosmic history, but has been a potential in the fabric of reality from the beginning, a potential that becomes actualized when matter organizes in certain ways, whether in brains or potentially in other complex systems. This perspective suggests that consciousness isn't an anomaly in an otherwise non-conscious universe, but a natural expression of underlying principles that permeate reality at all scales. Just as galaxies naturally form from gravitational attraction, or crystals naturally grow from chemical bonds, consciousness might naturally emerge when information reaches certain thresholds of complexity and integration. If true, this would mean we aren't isolated minds in an unfeeling cosmos, but participants in a vast ecology of consciousness, a universe gradually awakening to itself through countless centers of experience, each offering a unique perspective on the whole. Philosopher Bernardo Kastrup suggests, perhaps what we call matter is what consciousness looks like from the outside, while what we call consciousness is what matter feels like from the inside. Where does this leave us? With more questions than answers, certainly, but perhaps with a more refined sense of what questions to ask. Rather than debating whether the universe as a whole thinks in a human-like way, we might explore more nuanced possibilities. How might consciousness manifest at different scales? What role does observation play in bringing reality into definite form? How might our own awareness connect to larger patterns of information integration throughout the cosmos? These questions point toward a research agenda that crosses traditional boundaries between physics, neuroscience, philosophy, and information theory. Such interdisciplinary approaches are already yielding fascinating insights, from integrated information theory to quantum biology to consciousness studies. Dr. Emily Alexrod of the Center for Multiscale Intelligence suggests practical next steps. We need to develop rigorous mathematical frameworks for describing how information integrates across different scales, from quantum systems to neural networks to cosmic structures. We need better tools for detecting and measuring potential signatures of consciousness beyond brains. And we need philosophical frameworks that can accommodate consciousness as a fundamental rather than incidental feature of reality. Even as we pursue these scientific inquiries, we might also consider more contemplative approaches. Throughout history, meditative traditions have claimed to offer direct insight into the relationship between individual and cosmic consciousness, experiences that might complement the third-person perspective of conventional science. Regardless of where this inquiry leads, it invites us to reconsider our place in the cosmos. Rather than seeing ourselves as accidental observers in an indifferent universe, we might recognize ourselves as integral participants in a reality that includes consciousness as a fundamental dimension. As pioneering physicist Erwin Schrödinger wrote, "The overall number of minds is just one. In truth, there is only one mind." Perhaps the most profound discovery awaiting us isn't out among the stars, but within the nature of awareness itself. The remarkable fact that the universe has evolved, beings capable of contemplating their own existence and wondering about the mind of the cosmos. Whether the universe thinks in some way beyond human comprehension, or whether consciousness exists only in localized forms like ourselves, the quest to understand consciousness connects us to the deepest mysteries of existence. In asking whether the universe thinks, we're participating in a fundamental aspect of what makes us human, our capacity to wonder, to question, and to seek meaning in the vast cosmos we call home. As we conclude our journey through the conscious cosmos, we stand at the threshold of a profound revelation, one that transforms not just our view of the universe, but of ourselves. The quest to understand whether the universe thinks has led us full circle back to the most intimate mystery we know, our own awareness. Perhaps the universe's consciousness isn't something separate from us, but something we participate in, like waves on an ocean, locally distinct yet fundamentally connected to the whole. Our capacity to wonder about cosmic consciousness may itself be the universe's way of contemplating its own existence. The patterns we've discovered, from the neural-like structure of the cosmic web to the information processing capabilities of quantum systems, suggest that consciousness might not be a rare accident in an otherwise mindless cosmos, but a fundamental aspect of reality expressing itself at different scales and in different forms. Whether consciousness emerges from complexity or complexity emerges from consciousness remains an open question. Yet, both possibilities point to a universe more alive with meaning and purpose than conventional science has recognized. A cosmos not of dead matter, but of living information constantly creating and recreating itself through acts of observation and participation. As Carl Sagan beautifully expressed, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." This insight carries both humility and grandeur. We are not the center of all consciousness, but we are essential participants in the universe's ongoing awakening. The ancient Vedic sages proclaimed Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. Modern physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson echoed this sentiment, when he said, "We are not just in the universe is in us." These are not merely poetic metaphors, but potentially profound scientific truths. Alan Watts captured this reciprocal relationship perfectly. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. Whether the universe thinks as a unified whole, as a distributed network of conscious nodes, or in ways we cannot yet comprehend, the very fact that we can ask this question reveals something extraordinary about existence itself. In a universe of countless galaxies and trillions of stars, consciousness has emerged that can contemplate its own origins and wonder about the mind of the cosmos. That alone is miracle enough to inspire continued exploration, not just of the stars above, but of the awareness within. For in the final analysis, they may be one and the same.